Army, by the nature of its service and environment and all the challenges, risks, and dangers involved, the servicemen feel that this is not the place for women empowerment.
What would you say could be women's shortcomings in the army? Very recently, there was an assessment done by a GOC on 8 C.Os. The review said they lacked an empathy. They settled issues through might and not just mutual respect. And there were a lot of different points as well. What is your take on how this review and letter coming out in public domain?
But the fact that this letter came out in the open is sad. It should not have happened.
It's only been 4 years since women are allowed to be a CEO. So do you think there has to be some gestation period?
Palki Sharma, in her interview, she said they were never groomed. You get groomed by participating in day-to-day exercise. When you quote your personal obligations to say that you cannot go for an exercise which is training you for battle, you are denying yourself. The greatest responsibility in the army is not of the chief of the army staff.
No.
That is the commanding officer. Because every decision that I take, therefore, there are no compromises on a person who chooses and demands or goes to the court that I should become a commanding officer.
But there are some good examples from history as well, such as Rani Lakshmi Bai.
Yeah, Rani Lakshmi Bai, great example. But then everybody will have to be Rani Lakshmi Bai. We are not talking about one. A very common question that I ask is, are leaders born or made? Everybody says leaders are made. But my take is a little different.
Today we tackle a critical and a tiny subject, the role of women in the armed forces. To guide us through this nuanced discussion, we are joined by Major General Anil Sengar, a seasoned military leader with a wealth of experience and a thoughtful perspective on this evolving conversation. In this episode, we explore the challenges and opportunities in integrating women into leadership roles within the armed forces, especially since 2020, when women were officially allowed to take on commanding positions. The recent review by a senior officer of 8 women commanding officers and what it reveals about the realities of their roles in the military. A global perspective, how foreign armies have approached women in combat roles and why they often avoid placing women in crucial conflict situations despite progress in gender inclusion. The critical realities of warfare, its unfair and brutal nature, and why it demands a pragmatic lens when considering gender roles in the armed forces. This is not just a conversation about feminism or inclusion. It's about understanding the unique demands of the military and finding the balance between progress and practicality. Major General Sengar's perspective brings a grounded and a deeply insightful approach to this important topic. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a quick moment and ask for a favor. We noticed that 93% of you who watch our content regularly aren't subscribed yet. My promise to you is simple. If you hit that subscribe button, we'll keep working hard to bring thought-provoking conversations, incredible guests, and the topics you really care about the most. It is practically free for you, but it makes a huge difference for us, helping us grow, reach more people, and bring even better content your way. Thank you for supporting. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video. Major General Anil Sengar, welcome to Diary for Publisher again, sir. Always a pleasure to have you over.
Thank you, Shivam. Great pleasure being here again. Thank you.
Last time we spoke about leadership, different styles of leadership in the military. Today's conversation is also about military, sir. It's about women in the armed forces. We'll hear your perspective. We'll talk about the things that are happening. In 2020, a bill was passed wherein women were considered to be and commanding officers as well. Your thought on women in the armed forces first, sir.
You know, women in the armed forces is a subject of great interest not only in India, but all over the world. And unfortunately, it's an issue which is more thrust upon the army because of issues like gender empowerment and things like that. But all across the armies, the impression of people across, after having experienced women in the army, is that army, by the nature of its service and environment and all the challenges, risks, and dangers involved, the servicemen feel that this is not the place for women empowerment. That is the beginning. But unfortunately, you hear of terms like that the women have broken the last bastion by being in the army, or having sent women cadets in the NDA. I think if that approach of whether of the government of the judiciary to break the so-called bastion, I think that approach is wrong. Because whilst women empowerment is a good thing, half of the world's population is women, more than half India's population women. You got to look after them. They can contribute big way to India's economy, but you got to choose the right place where their talent, capabilities, and their shortcomings are well addressed.
Very true.
And army is a place where their shortcomings and challenges actually get exacerbated a great deal.
What would you say could be women's shortcomings in the army, sir?
We see on the television, you see army in various ceremonial roles. I can see, the poster right behind you. That's a president's bodyguard in glorious uniform and things like that. And then you see the army on Republic Day parade on the Kartavya Path, the old Rajpath. Men dressed in ceremonial dress with a whole lot of different types of bands dressed in ceremonial dress. And then you have women leading the contingent there. That is not the face of the army. That's a Republic Day face of the Indian Army. But the actual face of the Indian Army is on the line of control, on Galwan, on Siachen, on counter-terrorism. That is what the army is. And anything that you add to the army's existing way of life must contribute and improve the operational capability of the army. And if you honestly ask me, women, not because of their capability, but because of the challenges that they face, because they are women, because God has gifted them to bear children, they look after their children, they raise their families, they look after the houses. At some point of time, these challenges become so important that it is impractical for you to expect that they can give the same amount of time, dedication, and commitment as a male officer would.
Some examples, sir?
Yes, I'll give you an example. You see, women these days are in various support arms like signals, engineers, and then, of course, services like Education Corps, Medical, and JAG branch. Now, JAG branch is the law branch, legal branch of the Indian Army. And the lowest headquarter at which a legal officer is posted, a JAG officer, is posted as Corps headquarters. Now, Corps headquarters are all in good places, right? So, academically and technically, they should have no problem being in the legal branch because you're positioned at the right place. But I'll give you an example. That there was a JAG lady officer, and this is about incident which happened about, I think, 7 years ago or 8-10 years ago. She was detailed on a court-martial duty. Court-martial is there are about 5 officers on the as judges, and she's the legal advisor. So she was to move from her place of posting, which was another peace station, to a place called Kamti. Now, Kamti is where a whole lot of military units are there. It's a proper peace station. And when she was sent there for this duty, and this duty could be anything from, say, 1 month, it could last to a period of 6 months with certain breaks in between, she declined to go. And her reason was that I've got a 6-month-old child. How will I look after this? And she went to the court. And the court actually gave a stay order on her detailment of this assignment and directed that the army should provide a creche. That is my point. You see, you can talk of Israel army, you can talk of this and that. I'm talking of practicality. Academically, the legal branch, the judge branch should be the best place for these people to serve because they're all, the lowest headquarters is Corps headquarters. They're always in places which is civilization, as shall we say. They are not in places like Galwan. Even there, she had a problem, not because she was not capable to do that job. It is because her responsibility as a mother, and most likely her husband, must have been another army officer, and he may have been posted somewhere else. So these are the challenges that people who take the decision, whether it is women in power groups, whether it is your political leadership, or whether it is your judiciary, they got to keep in mind that employment of the army, there is far more than what meets the eye as far as the employment of the army is concerned. And this is one such example.
Right.
And I give you another similar example. I was Colonel GS operations in a corps, and a lady officer got posted from Lucknow to Ambala. That is where I was. She calls me from there and she says, I believe that Corps headquarters is going for a 3-month exercise. I've just called to tell you that, sir, I can't go for this exercise. I said, why not? He said, I've got a 3-year-old daughter. You see the point I'm making? It's not about capability. It is their challenges, responsibilities, and demands as a mother. And army is the last place where you can leave an officer behind, because today the Indian army is short of almost 20% officers, about 17, 18, as per the open sources. So in a unit, there are supposed to be about 22 odd officers. You reduce 20%, that makes it about 14, 15, out of which 1/3 of the officers are on courses and things like that. A number of officers are on leave. So that leaves about 3, 4. So how is the CEO going to manage?
Right. Correct.
And really speaking, the army is a lot about ethos, right? I remember that there was one post which was floating around a couple of years, that a district magistrate lady, she was in her office with a baby in a pram, and everybody, clapped. He says, what a great thing it is. It may be a great thing outside, but this does not really go with the ethos of the workplace in the army. Because army means business. No male officer can ever refuse any assignment, whether it is to go north, east, west, south, and he never does. But these are the challenges of the responsibilities that lady officers face as mothers. And the ones who run the house, that makes it so difficult.
True. Very true, sir.
Yeah.
So since 2020, there are now about 108 CEO commanding officers, women commanding officers in the Indian army, sir.
Yeah.
Very recently, there was an assessment done by a GOC on 8 women in the army, sir. 8 CEOs.
Yeah.
And some points that he brought out was that this was a review sent to the commander in the GOC in C of the Eastern Command, and the review said that they lack tact and empathy. They settle issues through might and not just mutual respect. And there were a lot of different points as well. First of all, what is your take on how this review and letter coming out in public domain?
I think the problem with this is, firstly, this was not a classified letter. It's an unclassified letter, but I'm certain it was not meant to be leaked out and come out in social media or be available to it was an internal military matter where the corps commander, and he's about 35 years service, that officer. He's seen the army for 35 years, and he must have been convinced that this issue needs to be highlighted. And his intent was to bring this issue to the notice of higher commanders based on his experience. But the fact that this letter came out in the open is sad. It should not have happened because it was not meant for anybody else. And I'm sure the army must be carrying out an investigation and take corrective action. So it should not have been in the media at all. But you cannot question the corps commander's decision to examine the situation of how the lady commanding officers, 8 of them, were performing, and write his opinion to his higher headquarters, so that whatever perceived shortcomings are there, they're addressed. I'm entirely with the corps commander to have carried out that assessment.
Now, a question of gender equality comes into picture, sir. So gender equality or gender neutrality, what would play in this such kind of situation in the armed forces mainly?
You see, there are 2 critical terms which he has used in that letter: equality and neutrality. Now, equality refers to the fact that the male and the lady officers must be treated equally. They must have equal opportunity of professional growth, personal growth, and equal opportunity to seek promotions in the army in the right manner. So that is about equality. Now, neutrality is that you treat both male and female officers by the same yardsticks in day-to-day life, in the way they are tasked on various assignments, in the way they are assessed. Unfortunately, in the neutrality aspect, the army doesn't get it right.
That's not the case right now.
That's not the case, and people will not accept it in public. But the lady officer example that I gave you, despite my very strict position that I took, that she chose to be in the army, and she knew that this is going to be her position. At some stage of time, she'll have children. Now, to quote that she has a child and she cannot go on an exercise. An exercise in peacetime is like going to war. So if an officer's personal obligations prevent her from attending an exercise, she's denying herself that opportunity to get trained and groomed, as somebody is saying. Like, if you recollect Palki Sharma in her interview, she said they were never groomed. You get groomed by participating in day-to-day exercise. When you quote your personal obligations to say that you cannot go for an exercise which is training you for battle, you are denying yourself. And then, of course, eventually this lady, I was ordered by officers of the rank of Major General, I was Colonel that time, that she will not go. Therefore, when it is question of neutrality, it is the army itself which must actually look at itself. Second thing is, all their standards are very different. The physical standards of male cadets in the academy are very different from female cadets. The amount of weight they carry is very different. The amount of time, the timing that they have to do, whether it is 2-mile run or whether it is a 10-mile run, is very different from women. So if they want to command battalions, they must be judged and be prepared to meet the same standards of capabilities, both physical and mental, as the rest of the officers. But that is just one part. That is one part. And there's second part, during the course of our discussion, I'll cover the second part. So that neutrality has to be strictly maintained. In the army, we say commanding a unit is your golden hour of your career. I commanded a division, I don't remember that. I commanded my battalion, I remember that every day. I get calls from those men. The greatest responsibility in the army is not of the chief of the army staff.
No.
That is a commanding officer. Because every decision that I take, every shit that I take from my superiors, there are 800 men looking at me of how I respond.
True.
Therefore, there are no compromises on a person who chooses and demands or goes to the court that I should become a commanding officer.
So you very rightly said the position of a CEO is the most looked forward by any army officer, army cadet or an officer as well. Having said that, it's only been 4 years since women are allowed to be a CEO. So do you think there has to be some gestation period for them to be, well versed or to carry out leadership roles much deeper before we can, assess the situation of women in these CEO positions?
Yeah, in a manner that I think, you see, these women have been in the army for 20 years. Now, a very common question that I ask is, are leaders born or made? Everybody says leaders are made. But my take is a little different, is that there are some people who are born with certain qualities which they stand out from the rest.
Definitely.
And they move into leadership positions far more easily.
True, very true.
Right? But there are others who can make an effort, very genuine, deliberate effort, and they can acquire leadership skills, right? So an average lady officer can also become a better leader if she gets the right kind of mentorship. And the question that I said about last time was that you get groomed by experiences in the army, by observing others. And that lady officer example that I gave, where she said that she cannot go and exercise, she denied herself a 3 months opportunity, which she will never get again in life, because that 3 months in exercise, you can never get in 10 years sitting in the office, right? Now, these lady officers who have now become commanding officers, they had missed that opportunity. For example, if you say an officer of ASC or Ordnance, before he joins his corps of Army Service Corps and Ordnance, he does 3 years attachment with an infantry battalion. And that is an extreme challenging terrain like high altitude, Siachen, counter-terrorist operations in the Northeast, where you really rough it out. You may be sleeping with 3 men in a 3-man tent. His leg may be over your leg, right? You may be sharing the same open daytime latrines. When you're walking up, he'll give you a bottle of water in his hands. Up, go for your nature's call. You grow up in that 3 years environment, right? Then you learn the art of leadership. You learn man soldier relationship. You understand. You build an equation that lasts all your life. Because these women, these kind of things, attachments were considered dangerous for them. They were supposed to be for short service commission. They were not doing that. They missed that opportunity. And therefore, the first set of C.Os had the disadvantage. But I'm not so sure that in future, if you tell them this, they will be wanting to do it. And I'll give you an example. There is an officer who retired as Lieutenant General. He said that he was moving from Punch to Rajouri. And somebody tell him there's a lady officer who's got to go to Jammu. Can you give her a lift? So this commanding officer said, yeah, please hop in. He asked her to sit behind in the, Maruti Gypsy army used to have. She said, sir, how can I sit with the soldiers? I can't sit with the men. So this lady officer then sat with the commanding officer in the co-driver's seat, which is against regulation. In the army, you cannot have two people sitting in co-driver's seat. So I'm just giving you an example that these are the things, the political leadership which is deciding this, the judiciary which is giving direction that make them commanding officers or let them go into the combat arms, they don't experience this. So soldiering is about man and a soldier, man and soldier relationship. And she doesn't even want to sit with men. I can understand why she doesn't want to sit with men. But does the judiciary and the political leadership realize this?
Yeah,
just some examples.
That's true. So let's do a case study. Let's say India is in a warlike situation with China, let's say in Siachen.
Yeah.
And let's say now there are a lot of women's officers in the army, in the infantry as well.
Yeah.
What all will they have to go through in order to win a post at Siachen, sir?
See, one is if she's a commanding officer, firstly, it's a long journey to get there. It's a long journey to get there. Like I gave you an example, she may be sleeping you're on a patrol as a young officer. Every kg of weight that you carry on your back has to be shared by the officer and the man. You cannot be walking with a stick in your hand and a soldier carrying your weight. And that weight could be as much as 30 kgs. Your clothing, your ammunition, your ration, your whole lot of equipment that you carry, the physical aspect. Second is, as I said, I was in a patrol, I was sleeping in a 3-man bivouac with 3 soldiers. So half the time, the soldier's body, one leg was on my legs. But I said, it's fine with me. He's a soldier, he does not know he's sleeping like that. Would a woman be prepared to go through this? If you're prepared to go through this, and I gave you an example, she didn't even want to sit with soldiers in the back of the vehicle. So firstly is to reach the position of a commanding officer. And to reach there, she would get married, she'll have children. And I actually don't blame them at all. For a mother, the biggest priority in the world is that 6-month-old child.
True.
Who's going to look after her? She may not even trust her husband with this. Is she going to trust her 6-month-old daughter with a male sahayak? No way. For her, she's the most important commodity in life.
True.
Therefore, if she's able to go through this and meet the capability and the attitude and the commitment, then she's right. Actually, she'll be fine to command that unit. But for that, attitude has to change. And I give you an example. And I was listening to the interview of an American corporal, the black African-American corporal. That was her second tenure in Afghanistan. She had left her 3-month-old 2 daughters, one 3 months old, one 3 years old daughter at home with her parents, and she was in Afghanistan. The day you're prepared to do this, you're welcome to come. But there are other issues. Now the women groups are talking of various kinds of leave. They're talking of maternity leave, during pregnancy, before birth, after birth. Now you're talking of a new thing called menstruation leave. You want to take these out? The Indian Army, I said, is already 18% short of officers, right? And if these women are out for so long, who's going to do their job?
So women got to realize that we are not disregarding these points like menstruation or pregnancy or whatever, but we need to get on the same page as to what requirements are needed in the armed forces. We're not disregarding that these are the issues that they go through, but we are saying that with these issues, can you also serve the nation on the same line?
You see, it's very different from the civil. You could say that you put them on a job which is office job, right? That is the way you can do it. Okay. If that district magistrate could sit with a baby in her pram, somebody will say, why don't you put them to control drones, and she can sit there with their high-tech jobs and things like that. But people must understand the ecosystem of the army is, say about 40% of the Indian army is deployed in difficult areas where families are not permitted. These are all the border against Pakistan, all the border against China from Leh Ladakh to Northeast, CIA operations, Northeast families are not permitted. So after a soldier has served there for a certain period, 2 years or 3 years, then he's looking for a tenure in a city where he can stay with his family, where he can look after his old parents or who are not well, parents who are not keeping well. He's looking for these tenures. If somebody tells me that you can put them in these jobs in safe places, you are taking away those postings from those men who will be denied these postings to look after their families. True. Right? So these are the things that people have to keep in mind. And let me tell you that everybody quotes Israel Army. Israel Army has a women infantry battalion. But that women infantry battalion is deployed in the safest of zones. Israel has been fighting for a year and a half. Have you seen one woman soldier in close combat on the TV? No, then nobody sends them there because everybody understands the challenges and difficulties and the dangers of putting men in close quarter battle. Afghanistan, Americans lost a lot of soldiers, women soldiers. They were not lost in close combat. They were lost in, they were walking somewhere along the road, IED blew up, or they were in a helicopter, the helicopter was shot down, or the vehicle met with an accident. And they're also classified as battle casualties. But the truth is that, and there is a podcast of an American Marine where the American politicians thrust it down their throat, and the Marine Corps was the only corps which actually opposed this. But it was thrust down their tenure, and then the study said that any Marine Corps battalion, which was a mixed unit, performance was far lower than all male units. So these are the actual experiences.
So even NATO has 14 countries of NATO have military leadership in women leadership in the military. Your take on that, sir?
You see, consider the challenges of NATO against India. Right? What is NATO fighting ever since 1945? Ever since NATO came into existence, they are fighting terrorists. Is their adversary as dangerous as we have, Pakistan and China? No. And when it comes to close quarter combat battle, it is the men which are there, not women. So you will go through. I have never doubted their capability to do things. I question that it is the challenges of being a mother. It is the challenges of being a lady. Women do outstanding job. You spend 3 months at home and you realize what great job they do at home. But then for a mother, who was that? Panna Bai, I think. That was one Panna Bai. She saved King Uday Singh, I think. By when somebody wanted to kill Uday Singh when he was a small child, she was the one who used to look after these, princes. She saved him by removing him and putting her own child. So her child was beheaded by the people who wanted to kill him. Panna Bai was her name. Because that's the kind of commitment we need.
Right.
You see.
But there are some good examples from history as well, such as Rani Lakshmi Bai. And I mean, we did a book as well on women in wars. I'm not recalling if we have it here. But what should we talk about here?
Yeah, Rani Lakshmi Bai, great example. But then everybody will have to be Rani Lakshmi Bai. You're not talking about one. They've been great examples. You see, but there are few. There'll still be women who will be able to meet all those standards that are meant for males.
Right.
But we are not talking of gladiators. We are talking of what an average person should be able to do.
True. True. Like the first conversation when you entered office today was about how grateful you are of your wife,
Yeah.
who's been handling all these situations in your home while you were in the army.
Yeah.
So you're not disregarding the role of women, but you're just saying that where you need to be present and give your 100% is not the battlefield.
True. And you see, India is not short of male manpower. You see, are you just doing it to drive point home of women empowerment? That the term that media uses and a lot of people use of breaking the last bastion of military where women have gone, you're celebrating as if you sent cadets in NDA. Is that kind of victory against the men? There's already an academy. There's already an officers training academy existing where women get trained.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the whole purpose of sending people to NDA? You know?
So I feel there's a disconnect between the women, ladies, and men in their ideologies at the moment. They, of course, through the history of evolution of mankind, there has been a lag between how women have been perceived and treated, and that is all coming out now, is what I feel, sir. So any closing remarks from you?
See, I think what we got to get right is that the political leadership and the judiciary must take the army on board, and the army leadership must have the moral courage to speak up of what must be spoken to the powers and get across the actual realities of the military, and don't go by the examples of Europe, because Europe, there are a whole lot of women who participated in the Second World War. They did. They supported the war effort. They were in nursing services. They were doing work in factories. In fact, you go to Russia, all their war memorials, there is a soldier, there is a lady, and there is a child, because everybody contributed. But you can support the military in many different ways rather than being insisting that I will be in the fighting arm, because I can tell you that you will make that battalion weak when you do that. You know, and this is not my experience alone. This is the experience of the armies all over the world. So don't push it down the military's throat. Places where they can be employed is JAG branch, education branch, and medical services. The Army's support services and combat arms, if you put them there, you force it down the military's throat, you, in my view, are compromising on their capability.
And they'll do a much better job in the segments that you spoke about, the domains that you spoke about.
Big time, you know, big time.
So you're saying that the policymakers must refer to the need of armed forces before making such changes and, you know, implementing such rules.
They must. And you see, what people forget is the entire body structure of a lady, of a woman, is made differently. Her bone density, the dynamics of her muscles, the way her body is structured is more injury prone than a man. And let me ask you a question. Pakistan or Chinese will not give her the, you know, will not look at her as a woman soldier. They're most brutal people. Pakistani soldiers are most brutal people, I can tell you that. We have experienced that in terrorism and otherwise. You know what happened to some of our officers who got caught in Kargil? They were horribly treated. There is no quarters given there. And I would like to ask a question. In which game do men and women compete together? Not even in chess. Does a man have any greater advantage over a woman in chess? No. Even there, the competition is different. Table tennis. Why can't women compete? There are no. Because the capabilities are different.
That's true. That's a valid point, sir.
Isn't it? Not single competition where women compete against women, because people have realized that they're made too differently and they must compete amongst the same group of people which have same capabilities. You're not even allowing transgenders to compete in, you know, you're rejecting them and taking their medals away. Even though at that point of time she was a particular sex, later on something comes out and take away because they say it's unfair competition.
Right.
There is a reason why a too short a man is not in the army. There's not a reason where too fat man is not in the army. There is a reason where a guy who can't see properly or can't hear properly, can't talk properly, he's not in the army. There's a good reason. There is a reason why transgenders are not in the army.
Hmm.
There is a reason why people retire at 38 years age. There's good reason for what the army does.
True.
So don't fiddle with this, because you do have adversaries inside and outside who are brutal.
Absolutely.
And therefore put your best men to fight those people there.
So I also feel that feminism is a cause, and I'm glad to hear more people speak more about it, because change comes with dialogue, and I've been hearing a lot of perspectives from different people, and that's a good sign, because people are having conversation about it. That's where changes happen as well. So we're on the right track. Let's see how things go. This is another dialogue. I hope we gave people a perspective, and I got a lot of perspective from you. So having said that, I would take this opportunity to also congratulate you on a book that you are working on right now, sir. It's about politics without politicians.
Yeah.
And I'll also take this opportunity to fix another podcast on the book.
Sure.
On that subject, because that is another subject that people must know more about.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Having said that, thank you so much for this conversation, this perspective. I think we all needed it. I needed it. I didn't understand a lot of what happened and what is happening and what must happen. Thank you so much for spending the time and being a part of this conversation, sir.
My pleasure, Shivam. I enjoyed this conversation with you and look forward to the next one, Politics Without Politicians.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
We at DOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better. Our production quality is going to get even better. And hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.